Hi guys, here we go with the chapter number 2 of the Classical 1d4 course. This is the Queen's Gambit Declined, and we're going to go with the exchange variation. How are you doing tonight, Jesse?
I am doing just great. We are in the middle of a massive heat wave, so if we're a little exhausted, that's why. I think it's been 90 degrees for the last week, 10 days, something like that. So we're gonna charge through. Um, D4, D5, C4, E6. First move that is interesting, I would say, Knight C3. And we're going to look at a couple different breakpoints here already. So start with the main line, Knight F6. And as Matt just said, we're going to go for the quick exchange. So what's the idea behind going for the exchange, QGD?
So what we're going for here is what's called the Carlsbad structure, and the Carlsbad structure happens after this exchange. Black has these 4 pawns on the queen side against our 3 pawns, and then on the king side, black has 3 against our 4. And one thing to note here is we don't take immediately on d5 until we play knight c3. The reason for that is because sometimes black can delay this move, knight f6. And if black's able to delay knight f6, we don't get the quick bishop to g5 that we go for in this repertoire. So that's a small note. But yeah, we're going for the exchange variation. It's popular at all levels, and it scores really well. So as you'll see in this course, Jesse and I are always talking about the scores. Here, white's already winning 53% to 40 for black with bishop to g5.
Yep, and one thing that's good about this Carlsbad structure is you're going to have a lot of these minority attack type of plans that are just kind of easy to play. So that's a good thing to know about the Carlsbad structure. So bishop g5, pinning the knight and adding a little bit of pressure to the d5 pawn, although it's well protected at this point. Also getting the bishop out of the pawn chain so we can play e3 someday. So black is going to break the tension, and we're going to play e3, as I just alluded to kind of close up this pawn chain now that the bishop is out.
And one thing I'll note here is if you've purchased the Caro-Kann course already, you'll notice that this is like a Caro-Kann exchange in reverse. And we're actually going to go for some of the same setups for white. So like Jesse mentioned, some lines we'll have the minority attack, but in quite a few of these lines, we're going to go with what we did in the Caro-Kann course with bishop g3, knight g to e2, f3, castle, and maybe even go for a center break. So we're looking at both plans long term in this Carlsbad structure, and if you're a Caro-Kann player who has our course, you're going to really like these ideas, I think, too.
And you really should be a Carlsbad player at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't, if you've known about ChessGoals and you're not playing the Caro-Kann, I don't know what's wrong with you. So bishop d3. Here already we have a nice threat, Jesse. Threat alert. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes back. Queen h5, threatening checkmate. Double attack on the d5 pawn. So if black plays a move like maybe rook e8, that could be a blunder here already because they're not aware that that pawn could drop.
Yep, that's a good one to keep in mind. This is also a really good square for the bishop because we're already lining up against the h7 pawn, which can be a weakness at some point too. So after bishop d3, c6 is a nice sane move to kind of keep this pawn overprotected. So good move by black. And we are going to play queen c2 and line up on this diagonal, threatening threat alert, take the knight, and then we can take the h7 pawn.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the most common move here is h6 to avoid that threat. And here we're going to drop back. And in this chapter, we almost always drop back with bishop h4 when we are kicked with this h6 move. The reason for that is because, kind of like in the Caro course, we want to preserve our bishop pair unless there's a good reason to take on f6. So almost always we're going to retreat. Knight b to d7 is the main move. And here we're going to go forward with our plan, very similar to the Caro course. Knight g to e2, rook e8, kingside castle, with f3 and e4 coming up.
Yeah, so on knight ge2, it's also very common to play knight f3, but I like this knight e2 move here because it allows for this f3 e4 expansion just right down the middle. And I feel like this is getting a little more popular, and it's also, it scores very well for white. I'm just going off my own memory here. I don't actually have a number.
I'm seeing 56% for white and about 38% for black.
Okay, so very strong.
Another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is in this line, we're also kind of playing against the c8 bishop. So by not playing knight f3 and by putting our queen on c2 early, we're not allowing that light square bishop to easily come out to either f5 or g4. So it's a little bit uncomfortable for black. The famous light square bishop, not trapped in, but doesn't have any great home going forward.
Yeah, it's no Rubinstein bishop for sure.
That's right. So now we see knight f8, most popular move. And again, we see that there's just a minor difficulty for black getting those pieces developed, the knights and the bishops. So here we're going to get ready for our center break. Pawn to f3. We're going e4 soon. And we're looking at moves like bishop f2, bringing that a-rook to the center, maybe even tucking our king on h1 for safety. And we're going to use this big center to push the action while black's minor pieces are all kind of stuck up there trying to figure out how to get into the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's a great plan, and sort of a plan that Leela or Alpha Zero, I guess, or Leela Zero likes too. Is they kind of like these like king side pawn pushes instead of like minority attack that we see very commonly. So black is going to continue bishop e6. Most popular choice at the club level. Little bit awkward because it's not really doing much to prevent e5 here. So we're not going to play it immediately. And we're just going to centralize our rooks on the next couple of moves. Is that right?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to note there with bishop e6, a lot of times the plan here for black is to play b5 and a5. And I think, you know, as computers have gotten stronger, like Jesse mentioned, Leela and Alpha Zero, one thing that started to happen in the Carlsbad structure is sometimes these minority attacks, a3 and b4, can actually be met by a quick b5 and a5 as a way to counter those pawns, and c6 is not always a weakness. If, for example, black's able to get a knight into c4, or maybe they push c5 later. So here we're kind of going with a modern plan of pushing in the center, and that's partially why we want rook a to d1 as well.
And also e4 doesn't quite work tactically. So if we play e4, I just see a note here. e4, d takes, f takes, then there's knight g4 at the end.
Yes, that's right. So back here, e4, the trade happens, knight g4. It's pretty uncomfortable for white. So these are lines where they're a little bit tricky, and we're adding some supplemental material to kind of let you know when to play e4 and when you can't. But you'll want to learn that these different move orders, and even kind of run it with the engine and check different ideas. When does e4 work? When does it not work?
This is what I was trying to highlight. The knight comes into g4 and has this fork on our rook and queen, and our bishop is also under attack.
Yes. So after rook a to d1, rook c8, most common move, here we're playing king h1 as another move to prepare e4. And if e4 was played right away, again, there was going to be a trade in knight g4. So like Jesse highlighted, we want to get out of that big fork. King h1 is a way to slowly prepare e4. And this is a position where black doesn't have any real quick plans either, unless they want to go with c5. So we're going to show the c5 line, and then we're going to show a line where black plays a little bit slower.
All right, so we'll go c5 first. We can take the pawn immediately, which is the main refutation to the c5 move, the early c5 push. So here we're just going to grab the pawn, and are we still looking to kind of expand with these pawns later on?
Now we're going to go with tactics. So I think in this position, black is running into a little bit of trouble. Bishop takes c5, bishop to b5, and this rook on e8 is already attacked. And look at this pawn on d5. Attacked by our knight and rook, and the f6 knight is pinned. So if we toggle on Stockfish here just to check the eval, I'm seeing a 1.6 advantage for white. Already it looks like we're going to win d5, plus we already have a strong position.
Yep, looks good to me. So we'll just follow another couple moves here, drop the bishop back, and we can just immediately take this pawn. Knight is pinned. It's going to be some pressure here. If they take here, we take with check, and that queen is hanging. So yeah, looks like a really good position for us. Probably borderline winning at this point.
Yeah, I think so, especially in classical time controls where you have time to figure it out. This should be a great position.